With Piaget's theory, basically the idea that you build mental structures to help you adapt and understand the world around you. And there are 4 different stages that we go through with Piaget. We'll talk a little bit about the first one here. A couple of ideas before we get into the first stage here. Schemes, these are actions or mental representations that help you to organize knowledge. For example, physical activities, those are going to be a behavioral scheme. Mental schemes like cognitive activities. Example of a behavioral scheme would be grabbing a bottle. So when you go to grab a bottle, you have to have your senses, because you have to be able to see it, you have to be able to touch it, you have to be able to feel it, and then you have to have your motor abilities where you're able to grab hold of it. So there's a lot of things actually going on just in the simple task of grabbing a bottle. There's a lot of things going on there. Cars would be an example of a mental scheme. When you see a vehicle going down the road, it has wheels, it's moving on the road. To you, that's a car. So now you have a mental representation, a scheme for cars. Assimilation, this is when you use an existing scheme to help deal with new information or new experiences. So let's say you see a pickup or a motorcycle going down the road. It's a vehicle, it's on wheels, it's going down the road. So to you, when you're a baby, it's a vehicle, it's a car. It's not a motorcycle, it's not a pickup, it's a car. You are assimilating it into a scheme that you already have. Calling all men daddy. That would be an example of this too, basically trying to force all men into the category scheme that you have in your head for dad. There was a kid that called me dad at daycare one day, and I'd never seen him before in my life. Another example, this was when Leif was younger. Sometimes he would reach up towards me and he would go, Maman, Maman. He wanted me to pick him up. He's saying Maman, that's the French word for mother. So in his head, Maman is the person that takes care of him and the person that's going to pick him up. And it's not necessarily a gender-based thing. He doesn't call me that anymore. But when he was younger, he, Maman. So that's assimilation, where you're trying to make things fit into these schemes that you have, but they just don't quite fit right. Accommodation is when you adjust those schemes to make the new information fit properly. So at a certain point, you realize, a motorcycle, it's not the same as a car. It has 2 wheels. A car is enclosed, a motorcycle's not. So you make an accommodation in creating new scheme for motorcycles. So those are some key terms for Piaget. This first stage is called the sensory motor stage. Sense, new sensations coming in, and then motor, new motor actions. And you are coordinating your senses with your new motor actions. A coordination of sensory experiences with motor actions. As an example, dropping a fork. When kids are at their high chair, they're eating, they have a fork and they drop it on the floor. There are all kinds of things going on there. They pick up the fork, they drop it, it hits the floor, bang, bang, bang. It makes these different noises. For them, they're like, whoa, what is going on here? I just took this fork and used my will to let go of it. And I watched it fall. I watched it hit the floor. I watched it make these sounds. And so it's all these new senses and motor experiences going on. Related to this, they'll drop it enough times, and then you keep coming and picking it up for them. They'll also learn, I can drop this fork and I can get that person to come over here and pick it up for me. So they're actually kind of training you a little bit at this stage as well. Another big idea from this stage is object permanence. You've probably heard about this, the idea of understanding that objects continue to exist even if you can't see them or hear them. Figure 3.17 shows an image of that. So in this picture, the kid's looking at the stuffed animal, sees it just fine. They put a barrier between the two. And then what some Piaget, especially earlier Piaget researchers would say, is that now the baby's like, oh, since it's disappeared and I can't see it anymore, it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. Peekaboo is a good example of this. Peekaboo. And then so what they would basically say is that you're gone when you got your hands up like this, and then when you come back, you've reappeared. On evaluating Piaget's sensory motor stage, there's first thing we'll talk about is called the A, not B error. This is the tendency for infants to reach where an object was located earlier rather than where the object was last hidden. I do have a video for that, and we'll see if I can play it. Here we go.
You ready? There he is. Very good job. There he is. There he is. There he is. Can I have the monkey? Here we go. You're holding on tight this time. You're holding on tight this time. Here he is. Here he is. Where is it?
Okay, so that's the error right there. They are looking under where it was before and not where it is most recently, even though they just saw it happen. So that's called the A is not B error. Older infants are less likely to make that error because their concept of object permanence is more complete than a younger kid. The criticism for Piaget's, and especially the sensory motor stage, is researchers nowadays think that infants are a little bit more competent than he thought they were. He thought it was like 8 or 9 months before they started getting this idea of object permanence. Researchers today think it's more like 3 or 4 months. So that's probably more accurate. Okay, that's it for the Piaget stages. On the next slides, we'll talk a little bit about memory and language.